Welcome to Thoughts on Investing. Today, we're going to be digging into one of the wildest stories on Wall Street, and that is Moderna. You know the name. This is a company that went from a pretty obscure biotech firm to a household name overnight. And its stock chart, wow, it tells a story of these incredible highs and some absolutely devastating lows. So, we're going to unpack what happened, and more importantly, what might be coming next.
Okay, before we really get into the thick of it, just the usual but very important reminder, this explainer is purely for educational purposes. It is not financial advice in any way, shape, or form. You've always got to do your own homework before making any investment decisions, all right? Good. All right, let's get right to the heart of it. I mean, look at these numbers. Moderna's stock had this truly meteoric rise, just blasting off to almost $500 a share at its peak. But what came after was a gut-wrenching 95% collapse. So the question we're really trying to answer today is a big one. Is the Moderna story done, or is this the quiet, early stage of a historic comeback? To get to the bottom of that, we're going to tackle this from a few different angles. First, we'll look at what Moderna is trying to become now that the pandemic chapter is closing. Then we'll dive right into the tug of war, the core arguments between the bulls and the bears. After that, and this is the fun part, we're going to let the stock chart itself tell us a story. And finally, we'll bring it all home and connect all the dots to see what it all might mean.
So, let's kick things off with Moderna's next chapter. Because right now, this company is smack in the middle of a massive transition. It's trying to evolve from being that pandemic hero into something much, much broader. And this timeline really puts the whole journey into perspective. You see, 2021, that was the peak, the frenzy. But then from 2022 into 2024, as the world moved on, the stock just entered this long, painful decline. But now we're in a new phase. You can see the stock has finally stopped going down, it's been trading sideways, and in the market world, that sideways action could be the market building a brand new foundation for whatever comes next.
And this slide right here gets to the absolute core of the company's big shift. In the past, Moderna was all about one thing, and one thing only, the COVID vaccine. The goal now is to take that exact same mRNA technology and turn it into a multi-product platform company, developing a whole range of new vaccines and treatments. Honestly, this transition is the absolute key to understanding the Moderna story today.
So even after that massive drop in the stock price, you can't forget that Moderna still has some seriously powerful strengths. For one, its mRNA platform, it's kind of like software for biology. You can program it, which allows for incredibly fast development. They've also proven, and this is huge, that they can manufacture and distribute on a global scale. A lot of biotech companies really struggle with that piece of the puzzle. And their whole strategy now is built on creating a repeatable pipeline, so they're not just a one-hit wonder.
So with those strengths and challenges in mind, how does this all translate into an actual investment case? Well, that brings us to the classic Wall Street showdown. The bull versus the bear debate. Let's break down the core arguments on both sides.
Looking at this, you can just see the battle lines drawn so clearly. The bulls, they're betting that Moderna can become a real leader in respiratory vaccines, right? That their new cost-cutting will buy them the time they need, and that their amazing mRNA platform will eventually spit out more blockbuster drugs. But the bears? Well, they see a totally different picture. They're worried about fierce competition, the risk of more pipeline failures hitting investor confidence, and the very real possibility that the company just burns through its cash way too fast.
And this quote, it just nails it. It sums up the entire debate. The fundamental question is this simple. Can Moderna turn its brilliant science into consistent, reliable sales? Or will it go down in the history books as a company with great science but inconsistent sales? That, my friends, is the billion-dollar question.
Okay, so we've looked at the business, the story, the arguments. Now let's switch gears and see what the stock chart itself is telling us. This is where we step into the world of technical analysis. And here it is. This is Moderna's weekly chart, and it tells such a dramatic story. On the far left, you see that insane boom. Then it's followed by the long, painful bust. But now, look at the far right of the chart. You see that long period of sideways price action right there at the bottom. In the language of technical analysis, we call that a base.
And let's zoom in on a really key detail here. If you look at those green arrows, you'll see the stock price came down to that $23 level 3 separate times. And each time it hit that level, buyers flooded in and pushed the price back up. This is a classic pattern called a triple bottom, and it's often a really powerful sign that the sellers are finally running out of steam.
So you can really think about this whole process in 3 distinct stages. First, the massive waterfall decline from $500 finally grinds to a halt. Step 1. Then, step 2, this long base forms where the price just chops around sideways for over a year.
This is the phase where all the selling pressure gets absorbed. And finally, step 3, you get the breakout, where the price starts to poke its head above that sideways range, signaling a potential new uptrend.
And I mean it when I say this is a textbook example of this pattern. A long base followed by a breakout. It's one of the most classic signs of a potential major trend reversal. This is exactly the kind of setup that gets chart analysts really interested.
So where might the stock go from here if this pattern plays out? Well, based on the chart, the first major level to watch, the first big test, is right around $60. If you look back at the chart, you'll see that was a key area where sellers showed up in force before, so pushing through that level would be a really big deal for this new potential uptrend.
Now let's say the stock can clear that $60 hurdle. If it does, the chart suggests there could be a lot of open runway ahead. The next major area of interest, the next logical target, would be way up around $112. That was another significant price level on the way down, so it makes sense as a next target if the positive momentum continues.
Okay, now for what I think is the most important part of any analysis. Let's connect the dots. How does the fundamental story, the business itself, line up with what we're seeing on the chart?
And this is where things get really compelling, because the two stories seem to be lining up beautifully. On the fundamental side, right, the business itself appears to be stabilizing. They have a new product getting approved, and they're being much smarter with their spending. At the same time, the technical story is reflecting this perfectly. The chart is screaming that a long-term bottom may be in, and that the market's overall feeling, the sentiment, is shifting from negative to, well, constructive.
So after looking at the business, the bull case, the bear case, and the story on the chart, what's the key takeaway here? What's the bottom line?
I think the clearest way to think about Moderna right now is as a high-potential biotech company that is right in the middle of a multi-year reset. The stock's future really isn't about what happened in the past. It's all about what happens next. And that success is probably going to come down to 3 key things: launching successful new products, generating revenue you can actually count on, and being super disciplined with their cash.
And that is our deep dive into the fascinating story of Moderna. If you found this explainer helpful, we'd really appreciate it if you'd hit that like button and subscribe for more. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you on the next one.